Move, Mom. This table is reserved for family, my son told me. Those words pierced my chest like icy daggers. I didn't know then that my life would change forever. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if you, for even a second, feel that this seems familiar, please just leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep venting. It was a Saturday night in New York, and the Plaza Grill glittered with its golden lights. I had reserved the main table, the one next to the window overlooking Fifth Avenue, where young couples strolled by laughing and tourists snapped photos. I wore my navy blue silk dress, the same one I wore when David graduated from college. I had my hair done at the salon that afternoon and even put a little blush on my cheeks. At 72, I still believed I could look nice for my children. The occasion was special. The 45th birthday of David, my eldest son. I had worked 40 years as an accountant at a textile company, saved every dollar, and invested in some stock market shares that gave me good returns. I had a small fortune accumulated through hard work, and I thought it was the perfect time to celebrate with family. How foolish I was. They arrived late, as always. David came in first, in his dark gray suit and that serious expression he inherited from his father. Behind him was Shelley, his wife, a blonde woman with a perfect smile who always greeted me with a quick, cold air kiss on the cheek. They were followed by my two grandchildren, Alex, 14, and little Sophie, barely 8. Finally, my younger son, Ethan, with his current new girlfriend, a girl who couldn't have been more than 25. I stood up immediately, my heart pounding. I had been waiting for them for half an hour, nervous, checking my reflection in the window glass, mentally rehearsing the congratulatory words I wanted to tell David. I opened my arms, ready to hug him, to whisper, "Happy birthday, my love," like I did when he was little and ran to me after school. But David didn't even look at me. His eyes swept the restaurant, observing the occupied tables, the decor, as if he were an inspector evaluating the venue. Then, without addressing me, he said something quietly to Shelley. She nodded and approached the table where I was still standing, smiling like an idiot. "Evelyn, we feel terrible," Shelley said with that sugary voice she used when she wanted something. "But we invited my parents too. We didn't realize you had reserved such a small table." I looked at the table. It was for 8 people. We were 7. "No problem, dear," I said, feeling confused. "We can ask for another chair." David walked over then, and with that cold voice he had perfected over the years, he uttered the words that would shatter me. "Move, Mom. This table is reserved for family." The noise of the restaurant faded. The conversations, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, everything went silent. I felt as if someone had emptied my lungs of air. "I beg your pardon?" I asked, believing I had misheard. "Shelley's parents will arrive any minute," he explained with the patience of someone talking to a small child. "We need the whole table. You can sit at the bar, or better yet, we can have dinner another day." Shelley looked down. Ethan was checking his phone as if nothing were happening. My grandchildren looked at me with confused expressions, but no one said anything. No one. I stayed there, gripping my purse with trembling hands, feeling the humiliation wash over me from head to toe. The waiter, an older gentleman with a gray mustache, approached, concerned. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking at the obvious tension at the table. "Perfectly," I replied with a smile that hurt down to my bones. "Just a small family misunderstanding." David was already removing my coat from the chair, folding it carefully and handing it to me as if it were an office briefcase. His movements were precise, calculated, without an ounce of shame or doubt. "Mom, don't take it the wrong way," he added, as if that would soften the stab. "It's just that, you know how these things are. The in-laws, the family politics. It's better this way." I took my coat without saying a word. My fingers, adorned with the rings I had bought with my own money, trembled as I hung it on my arm. I had spent $300 on that dinner. I had reserved 2 weeks in advance. I had bought an expensive gift that now rested wrapped in my purse. I turned to leave, but before taking the first step, I looked at my grandchildren. Alex's eyes were moist, and little Sophie reached out her hand. "Grandma, are you leaving?" she asked, with that innocence only children possess. David gently pulled her toward him. Grandma has things to do, sweetie. We'll see her another day. I walked toward the exit with my head held high, feeling all the eyes in the restaurant fixed on my back. At the door, the maitre d' stopped me. "Ma'am, everything okay with your reservation?" I smiled, even though I felt my soul splitting in two. "Perfectly, young man." In the end, the table wasn't for me. I walked out onto Fifth Avenue. The lights of New York shone as always, but I felt invisible, as if I had ceased to exist the moment my son uttered those terrible words. I walked slowly toward the subway, feeling the October cold penetrate my bones. That night, in my empty apartment on the Upper East Side, I placed 2 glasses on the dining table, one for me, one for my loneliness. And as I silently drank my wine, a horrible question began to form in my mind. How long had I been a stranger to my own family? The following week passed in deafening silence. No call, no text, not even a "did you get home safe?" After that humiliation at the restaurant. I waited, staring at the phone every morning while drinking my coffee, wondering if David felt at least a little guilt for what he had done. But no, the silence spread like an oil slick, filling every corner of my apartment near Central Park. The walls seemed to mock me with all those family photographs. David receiving his college diploma, which I paid for by working double shifts. Ethan at his previous wedding, where I covered all the reception costs. My grandchildren on their birthdays, celebrations I always organized and financed. On Tuesday morning, while reviewing my bank statements, something chilled my blood. Over the past 3 years, I had transferred more than $40,000 to David. $40,000. A fortune for any retiree. I recalled every one of those transfers. The down payment for his second house outside the city, the private schools for my grandchildren, Shelley's new car, the family vacations in the Hamptons where I was never invited, but always helped pay. "It's just temporary, Mom," he always told me. "When Shelley's business takes off, we'll pay you back everything with interest." Shelley's business, a decoration venture that had been about to take off for 5 years, but had only seen my money take off from my bank account. On Thursday, I received an unexpected visit. Shelley appeared at my door with a box of cakes from Zabar's, and that smile she had perfected for awkward occasions. She wore a camel coat that cost more than my monthly pension, and her perfectly manicured nails gleamed under the hallway light. "Dear mother-in-law," she said, kissing my cheeks with the same affection one gives an old piece of furniture. "How are you? I brought these sweets to go with the coffee." I invited her in, although something in my stomach twisted. Shelley never came without a reason, and those reasons always ended up costing me money or tears. We sat in my living room, where my collection of Chinese porcelain gleamed in the display cases. Pieces I had bought with my first savings, back when I still believed I would one day have a house full of family on Sundays. Shelley looked at the figures with the expression she used when evaluating the value of things. "Evelyn, I came to talk to you about Saturday," she said, stirring her coffee with delicate movements. "David he's very embarrassed. He didn't mean to hurt you. It was just an awkward situation. You know how men are with these things." "Awkward?" I asked, feeling the word scratch my throat. "Is having a mother awkward?" Shelley looked down, but only for a second. She had learned to recover quickly from difficult questions. "Don't say that, please. It's just that my parents are very traditional. They like to have a certain control over family situations. And well, you know how David is, always wanting to look good to everyone." Ah, yes. David and his need to impress. I remembered when he was 25 and I worked weekends so he could buy his first designer suit. For job interviews, Mom. Image is important. Now, 40 years later, his image was still more important than his mother. "I understand," I said, though I understood nothing. "I suppose at my age I should be used to being invisible." "Don't be dramatic, Evelyn. You know we all love you very much. It's just that—" Shelley paused, as if searching for the exact words. "Sometimes you feel like you need too much attention, and we have our own lives, our commitments." Too much attention. The phrase struck me like an arrow. Was it asking for too much attention to want to have dinner with my family on my son's birthday? Was it excessive to expect a seat at the table that I had paid for? "You're right," I replied. and I saw Shelley relax, believing she had resolved the problem. Perhaps I've been asking too much. Shelley smiled, that victorious smile that appeared when she got what she wanted. I'm glad you understand. David will be so relieved. Oh, and speaking of David, I wanted to ask you something. Do you remember those shares you have in the textile company where you used to work? The ones that gave you good dividends last year? There it was. The real reason for her visit. As always. What about them? I asked, though I already knew where the conversation was headed. Well, David has been thinking. With the economy as it is, maybe it would be smart to diversify your investments. He knows an excellent financial advisor who could help you move that capital into something safer. Bitcoin, for example, or some more modern investment fund. Bitcoin, the magic word of recent years. Everyone talked about cryptocurrency as if it were the solution to all economic problems. But I knew David didn't understand Bitcoin or investment funds. What he understood was how to access my money. Those shares have given me security for years, I said calmly. The dividends help supplement my pension. Yes, but think about it, Evelyn. With a good investment, you could triple those returns. And if something happened to you, well, it would be much easier for us to handle liquid assets than shares in a textile company. If something happened to me, she was already planning my death, calculating how it would be more convenient to inherit my estate. I stared at her, this woman who had entered my family as a sweet daughter-in-law, and now spoke of my assets as if they were already hers by right. I'll tell David I'll think about it. I lied. Shelley stood up, satisfied with her work. She kissed my cheeks again, and as she headed toward the door, she paused beside my porcelain display case. By the way, Evelyn, these pieces are lovely. Very valuable, I imagine. You should think about protecting them better. You know, making an inventory for insurance, just in case. After she left, I sat in my living room, surrounded by all the objects I had collected during a lifetime of work. Each piece had a history, a memory, a moment when I believed I was building something for my family. Now I realized that to them, I was just a temporary administrator of goods they considered rightfully theirs. That night, I took out my oldest photo album, pages and pages of memories. David taking his first steps, Ethan learning to ride a bike, birthdays, Christmases, graduations. In every photo, I was there, smiling, hugging them, being their mother. But as I turned the pages, a terrible question began to form in my mind. At what point did I stop being their mother and become their ATM? I closed the album and put it away. For the first time in 72 years, I wondered if it was possible for a mother to divorce her children. The days began to pass like ghosts. It was October in New York, and from my window, I watched the leaves in Central Park change color, while I remained motionless in my routine of solitude. I woke up every morning at 7, made my coffee black, checked the newspaper, and waited. I waited for a call that never came, a text that never appeared, an apology that vanished like smoke. On Friday, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. Take a walk in the neighborhood with no fixed destination. I needed air. I needed to see people. I needed to remember that a world existed beyond my silent apartment. I walked down Park Avenue, looking at the shop windows where I used to buy gifts for my grandchildren, where I chose those expensive dresses I wore for family celebrations that felt increasingly foreign to me. That's when I saw them. They were leaving Saks Fifth Avenue with bags in their hands, laughing. David, Shelley, and my 2 grandchildren loaded with packages. Shelley wore a new coat, one of those designer ones that cost more than $1,000. Alex had sneakers that shone as if they were gold, and little Sophie hugged a huge doll, one of those that cost a fortune at luxury toy stores. My first instinct was to approach them, say hello, ask how they were, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way they laughed, so free, so happy, as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't exist, as if the humiliation at the restaurant had been just a bad dream they had already forgotten. I hid behind a column, feeling ridiculous but unable to move. I watched them from a distance, studying my own family as if they were strangers. David was whispering something in Shelley's ear, and she burst out laughing. My grandchildren ran ahead, playing, happy, a perfect family. A family without me. Then I understood. They didn't miss me. They didn't need to apologize because, quite simply, they didn't miss me. I was the old piece of furniture that had become inconvenient, the chair that no longer matched the new decor of their lives. I returned home with a heart heavy as lead. In the mailbox, a bitter surprise awaited me, a letter from my bank. As I opened it, my hands trembled. It was a notification about a movement in my savings account. David had used the additional card I had given him years ago for emergencies. He had withdrawn $5,000. $5,000. Without consulting me. Without telling me. As if it were his money. I called the bank immediately, my hands trembling as I dialed each number. "Good morning, Mrs. Villaseñor," the employee said in a kind voice. "How may I help you? I want to know about a withdrawal in my account. $5,000 withdrawn yesterday. One moment, please." "Yes, I see it here. The withdrawal was made by Mr. David Villaseñor with the additional card authorized by you. Is there a problem?" Problem. What a small word to describe what I felt. "I want to cancel that additional card immediately," I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "Of course, ma'am." "Any specific reason?" "Yes," I replied. "It is no longer a family emergency. It is family theft." That afternoon, after canceling the card, I sat in my living room and did something I hadn't done in years. A list. A list of all the money I had given my children in the last 5 years. Every transfer, every loan, every temporary help that had never been repaid. David, $42,000. Ethan, $25,000. Gifts for the grandchildren, $8,000. Family vacations I financed but was not invited to, $12,000. $87,000. A fortune. Money I had saved working extra shifts, investing carefully in the stock market, buying some gold when things got tough. My life savings, evaporating into the hands of children who treated me like a walking bank account. The phone rang while I summed the numbers for the 3rd time, hoping the math was wrong. It was Ethan. "Mom, how are you?" he asked with that casual voice he used when he wanted something. "Fine, son." "Surprised, but fine." "Surprised? Why?" "For discovering I have millionaire children," I said, unable to contain the irony. "At least millionaires with my money." There was an awkward silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, I don't understand." "Ethan, when was the last time you called me without needing money?" Another silence. Longer this time. "It's not fair for you to say that. I call you because I care about you." "You care about me?" I repeated. "You know what? You're right. I'm unfair. You also call me when you need me to babysit your brother's kids so he and Shelley can go away for the weekend. Or when you need a free sitter for your date this week. Mom, you're being very harsh." "No, Ethan. Harsh is finding out that your own children see you as an ATM who also performs domestic chores." I hung up the phone. It was the first time in my life I had hung up on one of my children. And the feeling was strange, liberating and terrifying at the same time. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering. I remembered when David was 8 and got pneumonia. I spent 3 nights awake caring for him, taking him to the hospital, holding his hand while the doctors gave him IVs. I remembered when Ethan broke his arm at 10, and how I worked double shifts for a month to pay for the private orthopedist because the health insurance had a waiting list. I had loved them with every fiber of my being. I had put them above everything. My dreams, my comfort, my money, my time. And now, after 40 years of being their mother, they had reduced me to this. A source of resources who didn't even deserve a place at their table. At 3 a.m, I made a decision. I got up, went to my desk, and took out paper and pen. It wasn't time for computers or phones. It was time for handwritten words, with the ink of the dignity I had left. I wrote 2 letters, one for David, one for Ethan. In both, the same words. "Son, I've decided to take a vacation from being your mother. Don't look for me until you remember that I am a person, not a bank account. When you learn the difference between loving and using, perhaps we can talk. Until then, learn to live without my money. Maybe then you'll remember you also lived without my love." I sealed them in envelopes, but I didn't send them that night. First, I had to do something more important. I had to learn to be Evelyn Villaseñor again, not just David and Ethan's mother. At dawn, for the first time in months, I looked in the mirror and liked what I saw. A 72-year-old woman who was about to discover what it meant to live for herself. On Monday morning, armed with the 2 letters I had written, I decided to deliver them in person. I didn't want the cowardly refuge of mail or text messages. If I was going to declare my emotional independence, I would do it looking them in the eye. I went first to Ethan's apartment in Chelsea. He lived in a modern loft that I had helped furnish when he separated from his ex-wife. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, feeling my breathing accelerate. Not from physical exertion, but from the adrenaline of what I was about to do. I rang the bell. I heard footsteps, voices, movement. When he opened the door, his hair was messy, and he looked like he hadn't slept much. Behind him appeared the blonde girl he had been with at the restaurant, wrapped in a silk robe that I immediately recognized. It was the one I had given her for her birthday last year. "Mom?" he said, surprised. "What are you doing here so early?" "Good morning, Ethan," I replied with a calm that surprised me. "I came to deliver something to you." I handed him the letter. He took it distrustfully, as if it were a medical bill. "What is this?" "It's my resignation," I said simply. "As of today, I am no longer your full-time mother. I only work part-time, and only when mutual respect is involved." The blonde girl discreetly disappeared into the apartment, but I'm sure she kept listening from the kitchen. "Mom, I don't understand. Are you okay? Do you feel sick?" "For the first time in years, I feel perfectly sane," I replied. "Read it when you have time, between one date and another. And when you've finished reading it, ask yourself when was the last time you asked me how I was, not how much money I could give you." I turned around and began to walk toward the stairs. Behind me, I heard his voice. "Mom, wait. What are you talking about?" But I didn't stop. For the first time in my life, I didn't stop when one of my children called me. The second stop was more complicated. David lived in Greenwich, CT, in a townhouse that had a small but well-kept garden. A house I had helped buy, of course. The trip by subway and commuter train took me an hour. Time I used to observe the people around me. Young mothers with their babies, seniors traveling alone, workers heading to their jobs. Everyone seemed to have a purpose, a destination. I had one too. I was going to free myself. When I arrived, Shelley was watering the plants in the front yard. She wore a pink athletic set that looked straight out of a magazine, and her perfect nails shone even in the morning light of October. When she saw me, her smile froze for a microsecond before she recovered her perfect daughter-in-law expression. "Evelyn, what a surprise to see you here. Everything okay?" "Everything perfect, Shelley. Is David home?" "Yes, he's having breakfast. Want to come in? I just made coffee." "No, thank you. I just came to deliver this." I took the second letter from my purse. Shelley looked at it as if it were a bomb. "A letter? For David? Why don't you just call him?" "Because some important things need to be written, not spoken," I replied. "Tell him it's not urgent. He can read it when he finishes spending the $5,000 he took from my account without telling me." The color drained from Shelley's face like water from an unplugged sink. "Evelyn, I didn't know anything about that. David didn't tell me." "Of course he didn't tell you. Stealing from your own mother is not something you share even with your wife," I interrupted her. "But don't worry, Shelley. I already changed the bank passwords. From now on, if David needs my money, he will have to ask me like any educated person would ask another for a favor." Just then, David appeared at the front door. He wore a navy blue suit and a tie I had given him on Father's Day. He looked successful, prosperous, like the son any mother would be proud to have. Except I no longer knew if I was proud or just tired. "Mom, what are you doing here? Shelley says you brought a letter." "That's right," I replied, walking toward him. "A temporary farewell letter." "Farewell? Are you going on a trip? Without telling us?" The irony of the question hit me like a slap. How many times had they made plans, trips, celebrations without telling me, without including me, without even considering that I might want to participate? "I'm not going on a trip, David. I'm leaving this sick dynamic where I give everything, and you take everything, where I'm always available but you never have time for me." David looked at Shelley for an explanation, as if she could translate the words of a mother who had finally decided to speak clearly. "Mom, if this is about the restaurant, it's not just about the restaurant," I interrupted him. "It's about the $5,000 you took without asking. It's about the $42,000 I've given you in 3 years, without you ever thinking of giving back even 100. It's about calling me only when you need something. It's about treating me like an employee instead of your mother. But Mom, we've always known we could count on you, and you always have. The problem is that I've never been able to count on you." I handed the letter directly into his hands. His fingers, those same fingers I had bandaged when he cut himself as a child, trembled slightly as he received it. "What does it say?" he asked, as if he were afraid to open it. "It says that from now on, if you want to have a mother, you're going to have to behave like sons. And if you can't do that, then you're going to have to learn to live without your personal ATM." I walked away slowly, feeling their gazes fixed on my back. They didn't run after me. They didn't shout for me to wait. They didn't try to explain anything. And that, more than any words, confirmed that I had made the right decision. On the commuter train back to the city, an older woman sitting next to me asked if I was okay. Apparently, I had tears on my cheeks without realizing it. "Yes," I replied, surprised by the truth in my answer. "For the first time in years, I feel perfectly fine." "Are you sure? You look like you're going through a rough time." "I am, but it's a necessary time. Sometimes you have to break a little to rebuild better." The woman smiled with understanding. "My kids gave me trouble too when I decided to stop being their personal servant. But you know what? After a while, they learned to value me. Or at least they learned to pretend they valued me, which is progress." We laughed together, and it was the first genuine laugh I had had in weeks. When I got home that afternoon, I made myself a tea and sat in my favorite armchair. The apartment felt different. Not quieter, but more peaceful. As if years of accumulated tension had been expelled and now the air could circulate freely. The phone rang at 8 that night. It was David. "Mom, I read your letter. I think you're overreacting. We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, David. There's a lot to change. But talking won't be enough." "But we're family, Mom. Families forgive each other. They support each other." "You're right," I interrupted him. "Families support each other mutually. When you're ready to support me as much as I've supported you, to call me to ask how I am as often as you call me to ask for money, then we can be family again. Until then, I am simply Evelyn Villaseñor, and you are simply two adults who are going to have to learn to solve their financial problems without my help." I hung up the phone before he could respond, and for the first time in months, I slept through the entire night without waking up. The following days brought an avalanche of reactions that confirmed my worst suspicions about how my children truly saw me. The phone rang constantly, but I was no longer the one who rushed to answer every call like an obedient dog. Now I let it ring, let it tire itself out, let it understand that my availability was no longer unconditional. On Wednesday afternoon, Shelley appeared at my door without warning. This time she brought no cakes or diplomatic smiles. She came straight to the point, with desperation painted on her face like a poorly applied mask. "Evelyn, we have to talk. David is very worried about you. He says you're acting strange." "Strange?" I asked, inviting her in more out of curiosity than courtesy. "Is it strange for a mother to decide not to continue being her children's personal bank?" Shelley sat on the edge of the sofa, as if the apartment were enemy territory. "It's not that, Evelyn. It's just, well, you've always been so generous with us, so understanding. We don't understand what has changed. What has changed is that I realized my generosity had become your entitlement," I replied, pouring coffee she hadn't requested. "And my understanding had become your excuse never to grow up." Shelley nervously stirred her coffee, her perfect nails making small noises against the porcelain. "Look, Evelyn, I know David took that money without telling you. It was a mistake, I admit it. But we had an emergency. The children's school raised the tuition fees and we needed—" "An emergency?" I interrupted her. "Shelley, you spent more than $2,000 on clothes last Friday. I saw you leaving Saks Fifth Avenue. Don't tell me you didn't have money for the school." She froze. She hadn't expected me to have seen her. to have witnessed her splurge while robbing her mother-in-law for educational emergencies. That was different. We needed those clothes for David's work, to project a successful image. And my image? My dignity? Don't those matter? I asked, feeling my voice harden. Because you see, Shelley, projecting a successful image with money stolen from your mother-in-law doesn't seem very successful to me. Shelley looked down, but not out of shame, but because she was calculating. I could see the wheels turning in her head, looking for the right angle to regain control of the situation. Evelyn, I understand you're upset, but think about the children. Alex and Sophie adore you. Do you really want to punish them for their parents' mistakes? There it was, the grandchild card. The most predictable and effective emotional manipulation in the family arsenal. For years it had worked like a charm. Any complaint of mine vanished when they mentioned my grandchildren. The children, I repeated slowly. Do you know the last time my adorable grandchildren called me on their own initiative, without you forcing them to ask me for something? Shelley didn't answer because we both knew the answer. Never. Do you know how many times Alex has told me something about his life that wasn't related to a gift he wanted? How many times Sophie has drawn me a picture that wasn't accompanied by a list of toys for her birthday? Evelyn, they're kids. It's normal because you have taught them that Grandma is a gift vending machine, not a person who loves them, I interrupted. You've taught them that they can love me when they need something and forget me when they don't. Shelley stood up, and for the first time I saw something close to real desperation in her eyes. What do you want us to do, Evelyn? What do you need for things to go back to the way they were? That's the wrong question, Shelley. The right question is, what are you willing to do for things to be better than they were before? I don't understand the difference. The difference is that I no longer want to go back to how things were before. Before, I gave, and you took. Before, I was always available, and you only showed up when you needed me. Before, I was your mother only when it was convenient for you. She headed toward the door, but before leaving, she turned one last time. Evelyn, I hope you reconsider this. David is thinking of seeking professional help for you. He says maybe you need therapy. The threat hung in the air like poisonous smoke. Now, I was the crazy one. The one who needed professional help was the mother who had decided not to be exploited anymore. Tell David that's an excellent idea, I replied with a smile. I also think he needs therapy. Urgently. To treat his addiction to my money. That night, Ethan decided to change strategies. Instead of calling or coming to see me, he sent my grandchildren as emotional ambassadors. Alex and Sophie appeared at my door with Lucia, his current girlfriend, who pretended to be the cool aunt who had brought them to visit their grandmother. "Grandma!" cried Sophie, hugging me with that enthusiasm only children can convincingly fake. Alex, already a teenager and less willing to play the charming grandson role, stayed behind with his hands in his pockets. "Hi, Grandma," he mumbled, looking at his phone. "Hello, my loves," I replied, letting them in. "What brings you here?" Lucia, who couldn't have been more than 25 and had clearly received precise instructions, smiled nervously. "The kids wanted to see you. They said it had been a long time since they last visited." "That's true," I confirmed. "I think the last time was at Christmas, to pick up their gifts." Sophie sat next to me on the sofa, with that calculated proximity the adults had taught them to use. "Grandma, Dad says you're mad at us. Did your dad tell you why I'm mad?" The girl shook her head, but Alex looked up from his phone for the first time. "He said you don't understand that families help each other." There was Ethan's version of events. He was the misunderstood son who only needed family help, and I was the selfish mother who didn't understand the responsibilities of modern life. "And what do you think, Alex?" I asked. "Do you think families should help each other?" "I guess so," he replied, without much conviction. "Perfect. Then you're going to help me with something. I want you to tell me when was the last time your father or your Uncle David asked me if I needed help with anything." The silence that followed was deafening. Alex looked at Lucia for help, but she was as lost as he was. I don't know," he finally admitted. "Exactly. You don't know because it never happened," I said, stroking Sophie's hair. "You see, my love, helping each other in a family means everyone helps everyone. Not that one person always helps and the others just receive. Lucia tried to intervene with the clumsiness of someone who was clearly out of place. Mrs. Evelyn, I think Ethan really loves you very much. It's just that sometimes men don't know how to express their feelings. 52 years haven't been enough for him to learn how to express his feelings, I asked. Because he's very articulate about expressing his economic needs. Alex, who had been listening with more attention than he let on, suddenly asked, Grandma, is it true that you've given Dad and Uncle David a lot of money? The directness of the question surprised me. Apparently, something of what was happening had reached his ears. Why are you asking me that, Alex? Because last night I heard Dad talking on the phone with the bank. He was asking for a loan, and the bank man was asking about his income and expenses. Dad mentioned that he used to have additional family support, but doesn't anymore. Lucia became visibly nervous. Clearly, the plan didn't include Alex being so observant or so honest. Alex, maybe you shouldn't— Why not? The boy interrupted her. If it's true, why can't I say it? I looked at my elder grandson with new eyes. Maybe there was more hope in the next generation than I had thought. You're right, Alex. If it's true, you should be able to say it. And yes, it's true. I have financially helped your father and your uncle for many years. And you don't want to anymore? It's not that I don't want to. It's that I learned that when you help someone so much that they never learn to help themselves, you're not really helping them. You're hurting them. Alex nodded slowly, as if the explanation made sense to him. Like when Mom always did my homework and then I didn't know how to do it by myself on the tests. Exactly like that, I confirmed, smiling for the first time in days. When they left that night, Sophie gave me a genuine hug, not the forced acting from the beginning. And Alex, before leaving, leaned closer and whispered, Grandma, I think you did the right thing. Maybe not everything was lost after all. The weeks that followed were like living in the eye of a hurricane. While my children panicked trying to reorganize their lives without my financial support, I experienced something I hadn't felt in decades. Freedom. A strange freedom at first. Like taking off shoes that have been pinching for so long that you'd forgotten what it felt like to walk without pain. For the first time in years, my bank account remained stable. I watched my savings grow instead of evaporating in my children's endless emergencies. My stock market investments began to yield better dividends because I wasn't constantly withdrawing capital. Even those small gold purchases I had made as an economic safeguard remained intact in my safety deposit box. But financial freedom was only the beginning. The most revealing thing was discovering who I was when I wasn't defined by the needs of others. I started getting up later, not because I had to rush to solve some family problem. I ate breakfast on my terrace, reading the entire newspaper for the first time in years. Not just the financial sections I reviewed to make better investment decisions that always ended up financing the dreams of others. One Tuesday afternoon, I decided to do something I had postponed for years. Visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Met. Not to accompany my grandchildren on a mandatory field trip, but for myself. I walked through the halls with the tranquility of someone who has all the time in the world, stopping in front of paintings I had seen in books but never in person. It was there, in front of Velázquez's Las Meninas, that I met Carmen. She was a woman my age, elegant but unostentatious, who was explaining the details of the painting to her granddaughter with a patience I envied. The girl, about 10 years old, listened with genuine attention, asked intelligent questions, and treated her grandmother with a respect that broke my heart. See how Velázquez painted himself into the picture? Carmen was saying. It was his way of saying that artists are important too, not just kings and princesses. When the girl wandered off to see another piece, Carmen stayed contemplating the painting with me. Excuse me for bothering you, she said, but it seems like you're crying. Are you all right? I touched my cheeks, realizing I did indeed have tears rolling down my face. I'm fine, I lied automatically. It's just that your granddaughter listens to you with so much affection. Carmen looked at me with that immediate understanding only women who have lived long enough possess. Family problems? She asked gently. Does it show that much? Only to those of us who have been through the same thing, she replied with a sad smile. Would you care for a coffee? I know a quiet place near here. And that's how I ended up telling my story to a stranger in a midtown coffee shop. Carmen listened without judgment, without giving unsolicited advice, without minimizing my pain. When I finished speaking, she poured more coffee and told me hers. I was the perfect mother for 50 years too, she told me. The one who always had the door open, food ready, money available for any crisis. My 3 children called me when they needed something and disappeared when they got it. What happened? How did everything change? One day, my eldest son asked me to mortgage my house to help him with his business, an import company that was going to revolutionize the American market. I told him I'd think about it, and that night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the money, but because I realized I didn't know my own children as adults. I only knew them as walking needs. Carmen stirred her coffee with slow movements as if stirring up memories. The next morning, I told all 3 of them that I was taking a year sabbatical from being their mother, that if they wanted to continue having a relationship with me, they would have to build a new one, based on mutual respect and genuine affection, not on my utility. And did it work? With 2 of them, yes. After a few difficult months, they learned to call me to ask how I was, not what I could do for them. The third turned out to be exactly the person I feared he was. He never contacted me again unless he needed something. Doesn't it hurt? At first, it destroyed me. But with time, I understood that it was better to have 2 children who truly loved me than 3 who only used me. I left that coffee shop with something I hadn't had in months: hope. Carmen had given me her phone number and invited me to a group of women who met weekly. It's not therapy, she clarified. It's simply a place where mothers who have decided to retire from infinite sacrifice can talk to others who understand. That night, when I got home, I found 3 messages on the answering machine, all from David. His voice evolved from irritation to desperation as the messages progressed. First message: Mom, we need to talk seriously. This situation is getting out of hand. Second message: Mom, Shelley is very worried. She says you're different, that you need help. Please call me. Third message: Mom, please. I don't know what's going on with you, but we are your family. You can't just disconnect from us like this. I didn't return his call that night. Instead, I prepared a hot bath with aromatic salts, something I hadn't done since I was young and lived alone. I submerged myself in the warm water, and for the first time in months, completely relaxed. The next day, David appeared at my door without warning. He no longer came with the arrogance of previous visits. He looked tired, worried, even a little scared. Mom, please let me in. We need to resolve this. I let him in, but this time I didn't offer him coffee or sit in my usual position as the attentive hostess. I remained standing, waiting for him to say what he had come to say. Mom, I know I've made mistakes. The money thing, the restaurant, everything. But you're my mother. You can't just disappear from our lives. I haven't disappeared, David. I've set boundaries. It's different. Boundaries? Mom, we're family. Families don't have boundaries with each other. That is exactly the mindset that brought us here, I replied. Healthy families do have boundaries. Boundaries on how much they can ask, how much they can take, how much they can hurt someone before that person says, enough. David ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he had made since he was a child when he was frustrated. What do you want me to do? Grovel? Ask for your forgiveness for what exactly? I don't want you to grovel, David. I want you to grow up. I want you to learn to be my son, not just when you need something from me. But I love you, Mom. I've always loved you. Tell me, when was the last time you showed me that love without it being accompanied by a request for money? The silence that followed was more eloquent than any answer. David opened his mouth several times, as if to reply, but each time he fell silent. You can't, can you? I continued. You can't remember a single time in the last few years when you called me just to tell me you loved me, or to ask how I was, or to tell me something good that had happened to you. Mom, this is ridiculous. Of course. It's not ridiculous, David. It's revealing. And the saddest part is that you don't even realize it. David headed toward the door, but before leaving, he turned one last time. Mom, I hope that when you get over this crisis, we can remember this conversation and laugh about how absurd it was. I hope we remember this conversation too, son, but I highly doubt either of us will be laughing. That night, I attended Carmen's group meeting for the first time. There were 8 women, all over 60, all with similar stories of adult children who had turned them into resources instead of mothers. I heard stories that resonated with mine, but also stories of transformation, of women who had managed to rebuild healthier relationships with their families. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in my pain. At the end of the meeting, a woman named Mercedes approached me. "The first meeting is always the hardest," she told me. "You feel guilty for being here, as if being among us makes you a bad mother." How did you know exactly what I was thinking? Because we've all thought the same thing. But let me tell you something I wish someone had told me at my first meeting. You are not a bad mother for refusing to continue being a martyr mother. I returned home that night with something I hadn't had in years: a community of women who understood my experience without judging it. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in my decision to reclaim my dignity. The months of November and December brought with them something I hadn't experienced in decades: silence. Not the painful silence of being ignored, but the liberating silence of not being constantly available to solve the crises of others. Christmas was approaching, and for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't planning menus, buying expensive gifts, or preparing my house to receive a family that tolerated me more than loved me. I had started religiously attending Carmen's group meetings, and I had also started doing something revolutionary: spending my money on myself. I enrolled in art history classes at Columbia University, something I had wanted to do since my retirement, but always postponed due to the family emergencies that arose every month. It was a Tuesday afternoon, leaving a lecture on the Spanish Renaissance, when my phone rang. The name on the screen surprised me: Alex, my elder grandson. Not his parents using his phone, but him directly. "Grandma?" His voice sounded different, more mature, less rehearsed than in his previous visits. "Hello, sweetheart. How are you?" "Fine, I guess." "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Anything you want." "Is it true that Dad and Uncle Ethan owe you a lot of money?" The directness of the question left me speechless for a moment. Alex had always been observant, but this suggested he had been thinking seriously about the family situation. "Why are you asking me that, Alex?" "Because last night I heard Dad talking on the phone with the bank. He was asking for a loan, and the bank man was asking about his income and expenses. Dad mentioned that he used to have additional family support but doesn't anymore." I sat down on a bench at the university campus, needing to process not only the question but the implication that Ethan was having real financial problems. "Alex, does your dad know you're calling me?" "No, and I don't want him to find out, Grandma. I just need to understand what's going on. Everyone at home is weird. Dad is stressed, Mom cries when she thinks I don't see her, and everyone acts like it's your fault but no one explains why." My grandson's honesty broke my heart. At 14, he was asking for the transparency that the adults in his family refused to give him. "Yes, sweetheart. It is true that I have financially helped your dad and your uncle for many years. And you don't want to anymore?" "It's not that I don't want to. It's that I realized my help had become a dependency that wasn't healthy for any of us. Like when Mom always gave me money to buy lunch at school but never taught me how to manage my allowance." The comparison was so accurate that I was impressed. "Exactly like that. What happened when your mom stopped giving you lunch money?" At first, I got really mad, but then I learned to plan better, not to spend everything on snacks the first few days, to save for the things I really wanted. Now I manage my money better than before. And do you think that was good for you? Yeah. Even though I didn't like it at all at first. We talked for almost an hour. Alex told me things about his life that his parents had never shared with me: his problems in high school, his dreams of studying engineering, his worries about the tense atmosphere at home. It was the first real conversation I had had with one of my grandchildren in years. "Grandma, can I keep calling you?" "Without Dad knowing, I mean. I like talking to you when it's not about money or gifts." "Of course you can, sweetheart. In fact, I'd love it." After hanging up, I sat on that university bench for a long time, feeling a mix of sadness and hope. Sadness for all the time lost in superficial relationships with my grandchildren, but hope that maybe it wasn't too late to build something real with at least one of them. The following week, Carmen invited me to accompany her to a photography exhibit. Her granddaughter, the one I had seen at the Met, had some pieces displayed at a gallery in the Dumbo neighborhood. It was an exhibition on inspiring women, where children and teenagers had photographed the older women in their families, accompanied by texts about why they admired them. Carmen's photograph was beautiful. It showed her in her garden, hands full of soil, smiling genuinely. The accompanying text read, "My grandma Carmen taught me that tending to plants is like tending to relationships. You need patience, consistency, and knowing when to give space for them to grow. But the most important thing she taught me is that a woman is never too old to dig her heels in and say, 'This isn't acceptable anymore.'" "When did you tell your granddaughter about your decision to set boundaries with your sons?" I asked her as we admired her photograph. "I never told her directly, but children observe more than we think. She saw how I changed, how I stopped being constantly stressed by other people's problems, how I started dedicating time to my own interests. And did that improve your relationship with her?" "Immensely. When I stopped being the grandmother who was always solving family crises, I became the grandmother who had the emotional time and energy to be truly present with her." Walking home that night, I reflected on the difference between the two generations in my family. Alex, at 14, already showed more capacity for introspection and emotional understanding than his parents. Perhaps the lessons I had tried to teach my sons about responsibility and consequences would finally reach my grandchildren, even if by an indirect route. The following Sunday, while having a quiet breakfast on my terrace, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found Sophie, my youngest granddaughter, accompanied not by her parents but by Alex. "Hi, Grandma," Sophie said with that genuine sweetness that only small children can project. "Alex says I can come see you if I want to. Not just when Dad needs something." Alex shrugged with that adolescent shyness. "I told her we talked. Hope you don't mind. She really wanted to see you." I invited them in, and for the first time in years, my grandchildren behaved like real grandchildren. Sophie showed me her school drawings without asking for anything in return. Alex helped me water the terrace plants and told me about a book he was reading for literature class. "Grandma, why does Dad say you're sick?" Sophie suddenly asked, with that childish ability to ask the hardest questions with complete innocence. "Your dad says that?" "Yes. He says you have a sickness that makes you think weird things about the family." I looked at Alex, who rolled his eyes in exasperation. I told him that was nonsense, but you know how Dad is when he can't control a situation. "Sophie, do you think I'm sick?" I asked her. The girl studied me with that seriousness small children sometimes adopt. "No. I think you look happier than before. Before, when you came over, you always looked tired. Now you look, I don't know, lighter." Lighter. A perfect description of someone who had stopped carrying the emotional and financial weight of an entire family. We spent the whole afternoon together. I made them snacks, showed them my art history books, and told them about the classes I was taking. It was the first time I felt like I was being a grandmother instead of simply a resource. When it was time for them to leave, Alex hugged me spontaneously. "Grandma, I like this better. I like knowing you as a person, not just as, well, you know." "As what, sweetheart?" "As the grandma who shows up when we need cash for something." The brutal honesty of adolescence can be devastating and liberating at the same time. Alex had just confirmed what I had suspected. Even my grandchildren had learned to see me as a resource rather than a person. "I like it better this way too," I replied. "I like getting to know you when you're not acting to get something." After they left, I sat in my living room and, for the first time in months, looked at the family photographs hanging on the walls without feeling pain. Instead of remembering everything I had lost, I started imagining everything I could gain. Real relationships with my grandchildren, based on genuine affection rather than financial transactions. That night, I called Carmen. "I think I'm starting to understand," I told her. "It's not about getting my sons back. It's about discovering what's left when you strip away all the layers of manipulation and dependency." "And what have you discovered?" "That maybe I have wonderful grandchildren who were hidden behind grandchildren who had been trained to see me as a gift vending machine. That's more than many of us have managed to recover," Carmen told me. "Perhaps the next generation will learn what ours couldn't teach." December arrived with a biting cold that seeped through the windows of New York, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel that characteristic anxiety of the holiday season. There were no endless lists of gifts to buy, dinners to plan, or family gatherings to organize. It was strange and liberating at the same time, like waking up one day and realizing that a wound you had carried for so long no longer hurt. I was at Bloomingdale's buying a gift for myself, a cashmere scarf I had been admiring for weeks, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Evelyn? Evelyn Villaseñor? I turned to find Martha Jones, a former colleague from the textile company where I had spent 40 years of my life. I hadn't seen her since my retirement, almost 5 years ago. Martha, what a surprise to see you here. Evelyn, you look different. Did you get a makeover? I laughed, because the question was more accurate than she imagined. Something like that. I've made some changes in my life. Martha was one of those people who had the ability to turn a casual conversation into a full confession. In 20 minutes, while having coffee in the department store cafe, I had told her almost my entire story. My God, Evelyn, she said when I finished. I had no idea you were going through all that. You always spoke of your sons with so much pride at the office, and I was proud of them. But I confused maternal pride with the obligation of being a permanent family investment fund. Martha stirred her coffee thoughtfully. You know what strikes me about your story? That you worked with us for 40 years, accumulated a small fortune with your smart investments, became an economically independent woman, and yet you still ended up being treated as if your only value was what you could give to others. Her words struck me, because they precisely summarized something I had felt, but hadn't been able to articulate. It's ironic, isn't it? I continued. I spent decades learning to value my work, negotiating my salary, making my colleagues respect me professionally, but at home, I accepted being treated as an unpaid employee, whose only purpose was to solve other people's problems. And now what? Have you heard from them? Sporadically. David has called a few times, but always with the same attitude, as if I were the one who had to apologize for setting boundaries. Ethan has been more direct in his resentment. Do you regret it? The question caught me by surprise, not because I hadn't asked it myself, but because I had never had to answer it aloud. No, I replied with a certainty that surprised me. It hurts, but I don't regret it. For the first time in years, I feel like Evelyn Villaseñor, not David and Ethan's mother. Martha smiled approvingly. I always admired your determination at work. I'm glad to know you're finally applying it to your personal life. That conversation stayed with me for days. Martha was right. I had been strong and independent in every aspect of my life except the one that mattered most. I had learned to negotiate with suppliers, manage budgets, make smart financial decisions. But I had accepted being emotionally manipulated by the people who claimed to love me the most. On December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, Alex called me. Grandma, are you going to be alone on Christmas Eve? Yes, sweetheart. Why? Because that sounds awful. Nobody should be alone on Christmas Eve. His genuine concern touched me, but it also made me reflect on something important. Alex, do you know the difference between being alone and being lonely? No. What is it? Being alone is when you don't have anyone nearby. Being lonely is when you are surrounded by people who don't truly see you. For years, I spent Christmas being lonely, surrounded by family. That sounds really sad, Grandma. It was. But this year, even if I'm alone, I won't be lonely, because I finally have myself back. I don't really get what you mean, but it sounds like a good thing. It is a very good thing, sweetheart. Grandma, can I ask you one more thing? Of course. Do you think Dad and Uncle Ethan will change? Do you think they will learn to, I don't know, be better sons? Alex's question was the same one that had been pursuing me for months. It was the secret hope I didn't dare admit even to myself. I don't know, Alex. I hope so. But I've learned that I can't base my happiness on the hope that others will change. And if they never change, then I will have learned a very valuable lesson. That my worth as a person doesn't depend on others' ability to recognize it. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had been postponing. Write a letter. Not to my sons, but to myself. A letter to the Evelyn of a year ago. The woman who had frozen in a restaurant when her son told her to move because the table was reserved for family. Dear Evelyn of the past, I wrote. I know that right now you feel lost, humiliated, and completely broken. I know you believe that if you try harder, if you give more money, if you are more understanding, Your sons will finally value you as you deserve. I want you to know that you are right to feel pain, but you are wrong about the solution. The problem isn't that you haven't given enough. The problem is that you have given so much that you have taught others not to value what they receive. I write to you from the future to tell you that you survive. More than survive, you flourish. You discover that you are stronger than you thought, more interesting than you remembered, and more valuable than they had led you to believe. You will learn that real love does not require infinite sacrifice, and that healthy relationships have clear boundaries. It won't be easy. There will be nights when you doubt yourself, days when you miss even the crumbs of affection you received in exchange for your generosity. But there will also be mornings when you wake up feeling a lightness you had forgotten existed. Your grandchildren will surprise you. Alex will turn out to be wiser and more empathetic than you imagined. Sophie will learn to love you unconditionally when financial conditions are no longer involved. And you will discover that being a grandmother can be different and better than motherhood was. As for David and Ethan, well, that story is still being written, but it is no longer the only story that matters. Now you have your own story, one that does not depend on the chapters others decide to write or not write. With love and respect for the brave woman you are about to become, Evelyn of the present. I put the letter away in my desk, next to the family photographs I had decided to keep not for nostalgia, but as a reminder of how much I had grown. That night, Carmen called me to invite me to spend Christmas Eve with her family. Her granddaughter had insisted that I come, after hearing so much about me in recent months. "You don't have to answer now," she said. "But I want you to know that here you have a family that chooses you, not one that feels obligated to tolerate you." After hanging up, I kept thinking about the phrase, "a family that chooses you." For decades, I had believed that family was something you were born into, something you had to maintain regardless of how they treated you. But Carmen had shown me that family can also be something you build, with people who decide to value you not for what you can give them, but for who you are. At 9 o'clock on the evening of December 24th, as I was getting ready to go to Carmen's house, my phone rang. It was David. "Mom, I know things have been tense between us, but it's Christmas Eve. Don't you think we should..." "Should what, David?" "I don't know. Make peace. Start over." "Does starting over imply you've reflected on how you've treated me?" There was a long pause. "Mom, I think we both made mistakes." "Stop, David. Stop right there. If your idea of starting over includes making me responsible for the mistakes you have made, then you are not ready to start anything." "But Mom, it's Christmas." "Exactly. It's Christmas. And for the first time in years, I'm going to spend it with people who invited me because they want my company, not because they need my money." I hung up before he could reply, put on my new cashmere scarf, and left for a Christmas Eve that promised to be different from all the rest. For the first time in decades, I was going to celebrate Christmas feeling like I truly had something to celebrate. My own liberation,